The whistle cut through the desert night like a blade, sharp and haunting. Evangeline pressed herself against the rough adobe wall of the trading post, her torn wedding dress catching on the splinters as her heart hammered against her ribs. 3 hours ago, she'd been a mail-order bride stepping off the stagecoach into what she'd hoped would be a new life. Now she was prey. The Comanche raiders had struck without warning, their war cries echoing across the settlement as they swept through like a desert storm. In the chaos, someone had grabbed her, fingers clawing at the delicate lace of her dress, tearing the fabric from shoulder to waist before a gunshot sent her attacker fleeing. She'd run then, stumbling through the smoke and screams until she'd found this hiding place behind the trading post. Before we continue with Evangeline's incredible journey, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to help me reach my first 50 subscribers. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more epic Western romance tales. Now let's get back to the story. The whistle came again, closer this time. Not the wild calls of the raiders. This was different, deliberate, almost musical. Evangeline clutched the torn edges of her dress together, the white silk now stained with dust and fear. Her intended husband, Harold Pembroke, was nowhere to be found. She suspected he'd been among the first to flee when the attack began. "Come out, little dove." The voice was low, gravelly, with an accent she couldn't place. Not fully American, but not foreign either. Something in between, like two cultures blended in shadow and moonlight. Evangeline's breath caught. She peered around the corner of the building and saw him, a tall figure in buckskin and leather, moving through the settling dust with the fluid grace of a predator. His hair was long and dark, pulled back with leather ties, and even in the dim light she could see the hard lines of his face. Half his heritage was clearly Native American, the other half European, perhaps. His eyes, when they swept the area where she hid, gleamed like polished obsidian. "I know you're there," he continued, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "I can smell your fear, and your perfume. Lavender, isn't it?" Heat flooded Evangeline's cheeks. She'd dabbed the precious scent behind her ears this morning, preparing to meet her new husband. Now it betrayed her like everything else in this god-forsaken place. The man stepped closer, and moonlight revealed more details that made her pulse race for entirely new reasons. His chest was bare beneath an open leather vest, bronzed skin stretched taut over muscle that spoke of a life lived outdoors. Scars crisscrossed his torso, some from blades, others that looked like claw marks. A medicine pouch hung from his neck alongside a silver cross, the two talismans resting against his heart. "The raiders are gone," he said, stopping just 10 feet from her hiding place. "But this isn't safe territory for a woman alone, especially not one who smells like civilized things." Evangeline made her decision. She stepped out from behind the building, chin raised despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm not afraid of you." His laugh was rich and dark as coffee. "You should be." Up close, he was even more devastating. His features were sharp and aristocratic, with high cheekbones that spoke of noble native blood, but his eyes held the pale blue of northern European seas. The combination was arresting, dangerous, and utterly masculine. "What's your name?" she asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I have several. The Apache call me Hunting Wolf. The Spanish knew me as Gabriel, the Americans." He shrugged, one corner of his mouth lifting in something that wasn't quite a smile. "They just call me Trouble. I'm Evangeline Hartwell." She paused, then added, "Or I was supposed to be Evangeline Pembroke by sunset." "Ah." His gaze swept over her torn dress, and she felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with the damaged fabric. "The mail-order bride. Pembroke's been bragging about you for weeks. Said he'd ordered himself a real lady from back east." Ordered. The word tasted bitter, like a piece of furniture. "And now?" Evangeline looked around at the devastation. Several buildings smoldered, and bodies lay scattered in the dust. Her carefully planned future had died with the attack. "Now I don't know what I am." Gabriel stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something wild that made her think of storm clouds. You're alive. That's more than most can say tonight. Thanks to you. I was tracking the raiders, arrived too late to prevent the attack, but... His eyes found hers. I made sure they didn't take any captives. The implication sent a shiver through her. This man was dangerous, possibly deadly, and he'd just admitted to violence. She should be terrified. Instead, she found herself stepping closer. Why help me? Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she didn't, his fingers brushed the torn edge of her dress, not quite touching her skin, but close enough that she felt the heat of his hand. Because some things are worth protecting. The simple words hit her like a physical blow. When had anyone ever thought she was worth protecting? Her father had seen her as a burden to be married off. Harold Pembroke had seen her as property he'd purchased. But this dangerous stranger... I can take you to Santa Fe, Gabriel said quietly. There's a mission there, nuns who help women in difficult circumstances. Or if you prefer, there's a stage depot where you could book passage back east. Back to what? The question slipped out before she could stop it. A brother who sees me as a failed investment? A society that will whisper about my unfortunate adventure for the rest of my life? Gabriel's hand dropped to his side, but his gaze never left her face. Then what do you want? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities that made her heart race. What did she want? For 23 years, she'd done what was expected of her, been the dutiful daughter, the proper lady, the obedient bride-to-be. And where had it gotten her? I want to choose, she said finally. For once in my life, I want to choose. Something flickered in Gabriel's eyes, respect perhaps, or something deeper. Choosing can be dangerous. So can living someone else's life. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the moonlight. Then he nodded slowly. My camp is a day's ride from here, hidden in the canyons where the Apache taught me to survive. It's not civilized, but it's safe. And if I come with you, then you choose what happens next. The offer was scandalous, impossible, and utterly improper. A lady didn't ride off into the wilderness with a dangerous stranger. A lady didn't abandon her intended marriage for an uncertain future. A lady didn't feel this rushing heat in her blood at the thought of freedom. But maybe she was tired of being a lady. One condition, Evangeline said, meeting his gaze squarely. If I choose to leave at any time, you let me go. Gabriel extended his hand, and she saw more scars across his knuckles, evidence of fights won and lost. Deal. His palm was warm and calloused when she took it, and the contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. For a moment they stood there connected, and she felt the weight of the choice she was making. Then Gabriel released her hand and whistled softly, a different tune than before. This one, obviously a signal. A horse emerged from the shadows, a magnificent paint stallion that moved with the same fluid grace as its master. Behind it came a smaller mare, saddled and ready for travel. You came prepared, Evangeline observed. I told you, I was tracking the raiders. I knew there might be survivors who needed help. Gabriel moved to the mare and checked the saddle. Can you ride? Yes. Another small rebellion from her youth, when she'd defied her governess to learn from the stable boys. Though not side saddle in this dress. The dress will have to go. Heat flooded her cheeks again, but Gabriel was already moving to his saddlebags. He pulled out a bundle of clothing, buckskin leggings, a simple cotton shirt, and soft leather boots. Apache women's clothes, he explained, holding them out. They'll fit better than trying to ride in silk and petticoats. Evangeline took the bundle, acutely aware of how improper this entire situation was. Where should I... Gabriel gestured toward a small building that had escaped the worst of the fire. I'll wait here. The changing room was actually a storage shed that smelled of grain and leather. Evangeline fumbled with the buttons of her ruined wedding dress, her hands shaking. Though whether from fear or excitement she couldn't say. The silk pooled around her feet like spilled milk. And for a moment she stared at it. Her old life discarded. The Apache clothing was softer than she'd expected, worn smooth by use. The leggings hugged her legs intimately, and the cotton shirt, though loose, felt scandalously light without the weight of corsets and petticoats. The boots were perfectly sized, as if they'd been made for her feet. When she emerged, Gabriel's reaction was immediate and gratifying. His eyes darkened as they swept over her transformed appearance, lingering on the curve of her legs in the fitted buckskin and the way the shirt revealed the line of her throat. "Better," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Do I look Apache now?" "No." He moved closer and she caught that scent of sage and storm again. "You look like yourself, maybe for the first time." The words hit her deeper than they should have. How could this stranger see what she was only beginning to understand about herself? Loving the tension between these characters? Hit that like button and subscribe. I'm on a mission to reach 50 subscribers and you can help me get there. Every subscription counts. Now, let's see what happens next. Gabriel helped her mount the mare, his hands strong and sure as they guided her into the saddle. The contact was brief but electric, sending warmth shooting through her body. When he swung onto his stallion with fluid ease, she found herself admiring the play of muscle beneath his shirt and the confident way he controlled the powerful animal. They rode in silence for the first hour, leaving the settlement far behind. The desert at night was a different world, cooler, mysterious, alive with sounds Evangeline had never heard. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. In the distance, coyotes sang their wild songs. "Scared?" Gabriel asked when she shivered. "No." The answer surprised her with its honesty. "It's beautiful." He glanced at her, something like approval in his expression. Most white women would be terrified. Most white women haven't had their lives destroyed in a single evening. Is that what happened? Destruction? Evangeline considered the question as they rode deeper into the wilderness. Maybe. Or maybe it was liberation. Gabriel was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I know something about that. The space between destruction and freedom." "Is that your story?" "Part of it." He guided his horse around a cluster of rocks. "My mother was Apache, daughter of a war chief. My father was a Spanish missionary who fell in love with her during a peace negotiation. Their union was complicated." "What happened to them?" "They tried to build a bridge between two worlds. It cost them everything." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "My mother's people saw her as a traitor. My father's church cast him out. They died defending their choice to love each other." The pain in his voice made her chest ache. "I'm sorry. Don't be. They taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even if the world doesn't understand." They rode on, and Evangeline found herself studying Gabriel's profile in the moonlight. There was strength there, and grief, and something else, a wild freedom that called to something deep inside her. "What about you?" Gabriel asked. "What's your story?" "Not much of one. Daughter of a merchant who lost his fortune in bad investments. When he died, my brother saw me as another mouth to feed. The mail-order bride arrangement was his idea, a way to be rid of me respectably." "And Harold Pembroke?" Evangeline laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A man who wanted a decorative wife to show off his success. He never asked what I wanted, never cared about my thoughts or dreams. I was just another acquisition." "What do you dream about?" The question caught her off guard. When had anyone ever asked her that? "I used to dream about having a garden, growing things, creating something beautiful with my own hands, and—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "I dream about having children who would know they were loved for themselves, not for what they could provide." Gabriel's expression softened. "Those are good dreams. Impractical ones, according to my brother." "Your brother sounds like a fool." The simple statement, delivered with complete conviction, made something tight in her chest loosen. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Gabriel's eyes met hers across the space between their horses. "I know you chose courage over comfort tonight. I know you'd rather face the unknown than accept a life that doesn't fit. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. There was something building between them, something that had nothing to do with circumstance and everything to do with the way he looked at her. Like she was worth seeing, worth knowing. They rode until dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, following paths that seemed invisible to Evangeline, but were clearly familiar to Gabriel. As the sun climbed higher, the landscape around them transformed into something otherworldly. Red rock canyons carved by ancient waters, mesas that rose like sleeping giants, and hidden valleys where springs bubbled up from underground rivers. "There," Gabriel said, pointing toward a narrow canyon entrance almost hidden by fallen rocks. "Home." The canyon wound deeper into the mesa, its walls rising on either side like cathedral spires. Petroglyphs decorated the rock faces, ancient symbols that spoke of the people who had called this place sacred, long before Europeans arrived. At the canyon's heart lay a hidden valley, green with grass and cottonwood trees, centered around a natural spring that formed a crystal-clear pool. "It's beautiful," Evangeline breathed. "The Apache consider it holy ground, a place where the spirits gather." Gabriel dismounted and came to help her down, his hand spanning her waist as he lifted her from the saddle. For a moment, she was pressed against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart and breathing in his scent. Neither of them moved to step away. "Evangeline," Gabriel said quietly, her name a rumble in his chest. "Yes?" "Are you sure about this? Once we cross into the valley, there's no going back to who you were before." She looked up into his eyes, seeing her own reflection there, wild-haired, dressed in Apache clothing, poised on the edge of a new life. "I don't want to go back." Something fierce and hungry flashed in Gabriel's expression. "Good," he said, and led her into the sacred valley. His camp was simple but comfortable, a lean-to shelter built against the canyon wall, a fire circle surrounded by smooth stones, and supplies organized with military precision. Everything spoke of a man who lived close to the land, who needed little but valued what he had. "You can have the shelter," Gabriel said, unloading their horses. "I usually sleep under the stars anyway." "Where will you be?" He gestured toward the other side of the spring. "Close enough to hear if you call, far enough to give you privacy." The consideration touched her. After a day of riding, she felt grimy and travel-worn, longing for a hot bath and clean clothes. As if reading her thoughts, Gabriel nodded toward the spring. The water's warm, heated by underground springs, safe to bathe in. He paused, then added with careful neutrality, "I'll be checking the horses." Evangeline waited until he'd moved away before approaching the pool. The water was indeed warm, heated by some geological magic that turned the desert spring into a natural bath. She looked around, ensuring she was truly alone, then began to undress. The water was like silk against her skin, washing away the dust and fear of the previous night. She ducked under the surface, letting it flow through her hair, and came up gasping with the sensation of being reborn. For the first time since the attack, she felt truly clean. A soft whistle made her freeze. Not Gabriel's signal, something else, something wrong. She stayed low in the water, scanning the canyon rim. There, a flash of movement among the rocks. Someone was watching. If you're loving this tale so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I'm working hard to reach 50 subscribers, and every single one of you makes a difference. Help me grow this channel. Now back to Evangeline. "Gabriel," she called softly, but got no answer. The whistle came again, closer now, and she saw them, 3 men in dusty cavalry uniforms making their way down the canyon wall with practiced stealth. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized their leader, Sergeant William Nash, Harold Pembroke's friend and business partner. She'd met him briefly when she arrived at the settlement, and something about his pale eyes and cruel smile had made her skin crawl. Nash had found her. Evangeline slipped deeper into the pool, using the overhanging rocks for cover as the soldiers reached the valley floor. They moved with the confidence of men who expected no resistance, spreading out to search the camp. "She's here somewhere," Nash said, his voice carrying clearly across the water. "Pembroke's paying good money for his runaway bride." "What if she doesn't want to come?" one of the other soldiers asked. Nash's laugh was ugly. "Since when do women get a choice? Besides, after a night with that half-breed savage, she'll be grateful for rescue. We'll just need to." Clean her up a bit first. The implication in his tone made Evangeline's stomach turn. She pressed herself against the rocks, praying they wouldn't see her in the shadows. Well, well, Nash said suddenly, having spotted something. Looks like our Apache friend has been living well. Through the screen of vegetation, Evangeline watched in horror as Nash began destroying Gabriel's camp, kicking over carefully organized supplies, scattering his belongings, upending water containers. The casual vandalism spoke of a man who took pleasure in destroying what others valued. "Sir," one of the soldiers called from near the horses. "Tracks lead this way." Nash followed, and Evangeline held her breath as they approached the spring. If they looked closely enough, they'd spot her for certain. She needed a distraction, The whistle came from above, Gabriel's signal, sharp and warning. All three soldiers looked up just as he appeared on the canyon rim, bow drawn and arrow nocked. In the Apache clothing and with his hair loose around his shoulders, he looked like something out of a legend, beautiful and deadly. "You're trespassing on sacred ground," Gabriel called down, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Nash sneered and drew his pistol. "Come down here, Breed, and we'll discuss property rights." Gabriel's answering smile was cold as winter. "I prefer the high ground." He released the arrow, and Nash yelped as it pinned his gun hand to a nearby tree. The other soldiers raised their rifles, but Gabriel was already moving, flowing across the rock face with inhuman grace. What followed was like a deadly dance. Gabriel used the canyon itself as a weapon, loose rocks that cascaded down at his touch, narrow ledges that gave him angles of attack his enemies couldn't match, shadows that swallowed him whole, only to spit him out behind his opponents. He fought with bow, knife, and bare hands, never staying in one place long enough for the soldiers to draw a bead on him. One soldier fell with an arrow through his shoulder. Another found himself disarmed and tied up with his own rope before he knew what had happened. Within minutes, only Nash remained free, and he was bleeding from a dozen small cuts while Gabriel circled him like a wolf. "Where is she?" Nash demanded, clutching his wounded hand. "Gone," Gabriel replied. "Took the first stage out of the territory this morning." "You're lying." Gabriel shrugged. "Search all you want, you won't find her." Nash's face twisted with rage. "Pembroke won't stand for this. He has legal claim to that woman." "Legal claim." Gabriel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Like the legal claim your people had to Apache land? Like the legal claim that lets you hunt human beings for sport?" "She's white," Nash spat. "She belongs with her own kind. She belongs wherever she chooses to be." Nash raised his good hand as if to strike, but Gabriel caught his wrist effortlessly. For a moment, the two men were frozen in a tableau of opposing forces. Civilization and wilderness, ownership and freedom. "Leave," Gabriel said quietly. "Take your men and go. If I see you in this canyon again, I won't be so merciful." Nash jerked free, his face purple with humiliation. "This isn't over." "Yes," Gabriel said with finality. "It is." Evangeline watched from her hiding place as the three soldiers gathered their gear and retreated up the canyon. Nash kept looking back, his expression promising future trouble, but Gabriel stood unmoved until they disappeared from sight. Only then did he turn toward the spring. "You can come out now," he said gently. Evangeline realized she was shaking, from cold, from fear, from the aftermath of violence. "I don't have any clothes." Gabriel's back was to her, giving her privacy. "There's a blanket by the shelter. I won't look until you tell me it's safe." She climbed from the water quickly, wrapping herself in the rough wool blanket Gabriel had indicated. It smelled of sage smoke and leather, comfortingly masculine. "I'm covered." Gabriel turned, and his expression went dark when he saw her trembling. "Are you hurt?" "No, just I'm scared. They were going to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Gabriel's jaw tightened. They won't get another chance. Nash said Harold is paying them to bring me back, that he has legal claim to me. Legal doesn't mean right. Gabriel moved closer, and she saw that he had a cut across one cheekbone from the fight. "Are you regretting your choice? We could get you to Santa Fe before they regroup. Evangeline looked around the sacred valley, at the ancient petroglyphs that had witnessed countless generations of human struggle, at the spring that had provided life in the desert for thousands of years, at the man who had just risked his life to protect her freedom. No, I'm not regretting anything. Something shifted in Gabriel's expression. They'll come back, probably with more men. Then we'll deal with it when they do. We? Evangeline let the blanket slip slightly, just enough to expose her shoulder and the column of her throat. Gabriel's eyes followed the movement, and she saw his pupils dilate. I told you, I want to choose my own life. That includes choosing who I stand with. Gabriel stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Evangeline, you need to understand what you're saying. If you stay with me, there's no going back to respectable society. You'll be an outcast, a woman who chose a half-breed over civilization. And what will you be? A man who finally found something worth protecting. The words hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Evangeline took a step forward, closing the distance between them until she could feel his breath against her skin. Show me, she whispered. Gabriel's control snapped. His hands came up to frame her face, fingers threading through her damp hair as his mouth claimed hers. The kiss was everything she'd never experienced, hungry, demanding, full of barely leashed passion that made her bones melt. She dropped the blanket and pressed against him, skin to leather, softness to hard muscle. Gabriel groaned against her mouth, his hands skimming down her back to pull her closer. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart, could taste the desperation in his kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I've wanted to do that since I first saw you, Gabriel admitted, his forehead pressed against hers. Then why did you wait? Because once I touch you, I won't be able to let you go. Evangeline smiled and reached for the ties of his vest. Good, I don't want you to let me go. We're getting to the most intense part of the story. If you're hooked, show your support by hitting like and subscribe. Help me reach 50 subscribers so I can keep bringing you these passionate Western romances. Let's continue. What followed was a dance as old as time itself, played out in a sacred valley under the desert stars. Gabriel's hands were reverent as they explored her skin, mapping every curve and hollow with the devotion of a man who had found his treasure. Evangeline had never known her body could feel such things. Pleasure that built like storm clouds. Tension that coiled tighter with every touch until she thought she might break apart from the intensity of it. When Gabriel finally made her his, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. He whispered her name like a prayer, moved with her like they were dancing to music only they could hear. And when release finally claimed them both, it was with a completeness that felt like coming home. Afterward, they lay entwined beside the spring, Evangeline's head on Gabriel's chest as his fingers combed through her hair. The night air was cool against their heated skin, but wrapped in Gabriel's arms, she felt safer than she ever had in her life. What happens now? She asked quietly. Gabriel's arm tightened around her. Now we build something new, something that belongs to us. The Apache won't accept me. White society never will again. Then we make our own society. Gabriel's voice was fierce with conviction. There are others like us, people caught between worlds, people who don't fit in the neat categories civilization demands. We'll find them. Build a community where love matters more than blood quantum or skin color. Evangeline lifted her head to look at him. You really believe that's possible? With you? I believe anything is possible. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, sealing the promise between them. When they finally slept, it was twined together like two trees that had grown around each other, roots so intertwined that nothing could separate them. Dawn brought the sound of distant gunshots, and Gabriel was instantly alert, his warrior instincts honed by years of survival. He woke Evangeline with a gentle touch, already reaching for his weapons. "What is it?" she asked, pulling on her clothes quickly. "Trouble." Gabriel's face was grim as he checked his rifle. Multiple riders. Moving fast. Nash must have brought reinforcements. They could hear voices echoing off the canyon walls, harsh, angry sounds that spoke of men bent on violence. Gabriel quickly began packing essential supplies while Evangeline gathered what few possessions she had. "There's another way out," Gabriel said quietly. "Hidden trail that leads to the mesa top. From there, we can reach Apache territory." "Won't your mother's people see me as an enemy?" Gabriel paused in his packing to cup her face in his hands. "My grandmother is still alive. She's the one who taught me that love recognizes no boundaries, that the heart chooses what it chooses. She'll understand." The voices were getting closer now, and Evangeline could make out individual words. Threats. Crude jokes about what they'd do when they found her. Her blood ran cold, but Gabriel's steady presence kept her focused. "This way," he whispered, leading her toward what looked like a solid wall of rock. Up close, she could see it was actually a cleverly concealed passage, just wide enough for them to squeeze through single file. They made it into the hidden trail just as the first soldiers appeared in the valley below. Evangeline heard Nash's voice, harsh with frustration, as he discovered their abandoned camp. "Find them!" he shouted. "I don't care if you have to tear this canyon apart stone by stone." Gabriel and Evangeline climbed in silence, moving through passages carved by wind and water over millennia. The trail was treacherous, requiring complete trust in Gabriel's guidance, but Evangeline found herself calm. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They emerged onto the mesa as the sun reached its zenith, the desert spreading out below them in all directions like a vast golden sea. In the distance, smoke rose from Apache fires, Gabriel's mother's people, his other home. "Are you ready?" Gabriel asked, taking her hand. Evangeline looked back once at the canyon where her old life had truly ended, and her new one had begun. Then she turned toward the future, toward a people who might accept her, toward a love that had already transformed her into someone she barely recognized. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. They rode toward the Apache camp together, two souls who had found each other in the space between worlds. Behind them, Nash's frustrated shouts echoed off the canyon walls, but the sound grew fainter with each mile until it disappeared altogether, swallowed by the vast indifference of the desert. 3 months later, Evangeline stood in the garden she had planted behind the small adobe house Gabriel had built for them. The vegetables were thriving in the desert soil, testament to the power of careful tending and patient love. Her hands were brown from the sun and calloused from work, and she had never been happier. The Apache had indeed accepted her, not easily, and not without suspicion, but Gabriel's grandmother had spoken for her, recognizing something in Evangeline's eyes that transcended skin color. She had learned to speak their language, to understand their ways, to contribute to the community that had embraced her. Other outcasts had found them too, just as Gabriel had predicted. There was Maria, a Mexican woman who had fled an abusive husband, James, a former slave seeking freedom in the territories, and Robert, a white man disowned by his family for loving another man. Together, they were building something new, a community where love and acceptance mattered more than the arbitrary divisions imposed by the outside world. Gabriel emerged from the house, moving with the same fluid grace that had first caught her attention. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest as they watched the sun set over their domain. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. Evangeline leaned into his embrace, one hand moving to rest on the gentle swell of her belly where their child grew. They hadn't told the others yet, but Gabriel had guessed from the way she'd started avoiding certain smells and the new softness in her expression. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered honestly. In the distance, a whistle sounded, not threatening this time, but musical and sweet. It was their signal, the one Gabriel had taught their small community to use when visitors approached. But these weren't raiders or soldiers. These were traders, other outcasts, people seeking the sanctuary they had created. "More refugees from civilization," Gabriel observed with amusement. "Our family keeps growing. Is that a problem?" Evangeline turned in his arms, going up on her toes to kiss him thoroughly. "Never. Love multiplies. It doesn't divide." As if in response to her words, the baby kicked for the first time, a flutter of life that made them both gasp with wonder. Gabriel's hand covered hers on her belly, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Our child will know both worlds," Evangeline said softly, "but they'll belong to themselves, just like their parents." As night fell over their hidden valley, Gabriel and Evangeline stood together in the garden they had grown from nothing, surrounded by the community they had built from love. In the distance, the traders' fires twinkled like earthbound stars, promising new stories, new connections, new possibilities for the family they were creating one heart at a time. The whistle in the shadows had led to freedom, and freedom, they had learned, was just another word for love. Thank you so much for reading, listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please smash that like button and subscribe to help me reach my goal of 50 subscribers. Your support helps me create more amazing Western romance stories for you. What did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. The end.